Hello. Now this is a story of a farmer, his 3 sons and 17 cows. And it starts off a bit sad really, because the poor old boy who was the farmer, he dies. And they have a funeral, and after the funeral they have what's called a will, where you divide up what the farmer owned between the people he loved. And he loved his 3 sons, so he decided he was going to divide his herd of 7 cows between the 3 sons. Now, the first son, he was entitled to half of the herd. And he wasn't the cleverest of the 3 sons, so he was taken a while to work out what 17 divided by 2 is. Now, have you got that? What's 17 divided by 2? Well, the second oldest son was a bit cleverer, and he said, I know. He said it's 8.5. And they thought, well, how are we going to do that? Because we can count off 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Well, what do we do with this one? Do we cut him in half? And the cow gulped at the thought of that. Well, the first son said, well, I remember when I was at school that if it came to a half, we were allowed to round up. And that would mean 9. And the other 2 sons said, no, you're not entitled to 9. You're only entitled to 8.5. So let's have a read through and see what the rest of us are entitled to. Now, the second son was entitled to 1/3. Wow, it's getting a bit tricky now, isn't it? What's 17 divided by 3? They thought about it for a while. And again, the second son, who was quite clever, said, I think it's 3 5s are 15 with 2 over. So that's 5 2/3. And he said, well, 2/3 is closer to a whole than a half was. Perhaps I could have 6. And he started to count himself off 6. And the other 2 said, no way. You're only entitled to 5 2/3. And they thought, well, what are we going to do? So they decided to read what the third son, the youngest son, was entitled to. And he was entitled to 1/9. Wow, now that's getting really tricky. What is 1/9 of 17? 17 divided by 9. Well, they had to go and ask someone about that one. And they came back, and of course it's 1 8/9. Well, the youngest son said, well, 8/9 is pretty much everything except for the tail. Surely you don't mind me having an extra one. I could have 2. And the other 2 said, no, you can't. You're only entitled to 1 8/9. And they started to argue. And it was really sad. And next door, there was another old farmer. And this old farmer had watched these young lads grow up, and he loved them dearly, and he was so sad to see them arguing. And this farmer only had 1 cow, and it had been with him for years. It was almost like a family pet, part of the family. And he decided, well, I'll tell you what, if I give them my cow and see if that makes any difference. So how many have we got now? Let's have a count, shall we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Well, let's try again and see if it works this time. So what was the first son entitled to? That's right, a half. Half of 18, 18 divided by 2 is, you got it, it's 9. And that was fine because 9's a whole number. So the first son takes away his 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Everyone's happy. The second son was entitled to 1/3. What's 18 divided by 3? Simple. It's 6. So they were happy with that. So the second son has 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then it came to the third son. Now what was the third son entitled to? A 9th. And 18 divided by 9 is 2. Everyone's happy. 1, 2. And the third son takes a 2. Well, 9 plus 6 plus 2 comes to 17. And so the farmer takes his cow back home and everyone's happy. So what's the moral of that story? Well, God looked down at the world and he saw how people weren't getting on. He saw how they were arguing and people were being cruel and unkind. And he decided, what am I going to do about it? And so he decided, I know, I'll send the one thing that's really precious to me. I'll send my son. And Jesus came to the world and he showed people how to live and he taught them how to do things properly. And then, most important of all, he died on a cross for each of us. But you know what? 3 days later, God brought him back to life. And just like taking that cow home, God took Jesus back into heaven, where he lives today, and he's waiting for that day when he'll come back. I hope you enjoyed the story, and perhaps I'll think of another one for another time. Bye.